Chapter 1, The Illusion That Makes You Feel Watched. There is a quiet moment almost everyone recognizes, even if they have never paused to examine it. You say something that comes out slightly wrong. Not offensive, not dramatic, just awkward enough to linger. A joke misses its rhythm. A sentence sounds less intelligent than it did in your head. You notice a brief pause, a few polite smiles, a subtle shift in the room, and in that instant, something tightens inside you. Your body reacts before your mind can intervene. Heat rises to your face, your chest sinks, your thoughts begin to race. You replay the moment as if it were evidence in a trial. What did that sound like? Why did I say it that way? They noticed. They're judging me. They'll remember this. From the outside, nothing meaningful happened. The conversation moved on. Someone else spoke. Laughter returned. Life continued. But inside you, the moment did not end. It looped. You edited the sentence in your head, imagined better versions, harsher reactions, lasting impressions. By the end of the evening, you were no longer present. You were sitting under an invisible spotlight, convinced that everyone else was still watching. This experience is not weakness. It is not a character flaw. It is not proof that something is wrong with you. It is a deeply human illusion. An illusion that convinces you that you are far more visible, far more judged, and far more remembered than you actually are. Epictetus observed long ago that the moment you believe other people's perceptions govern your inner state, you surrender authority over your life. Not because they took it from you, but because you handed it over. Your mind was not shaped to make you peaceful. It was shaped to keep you safe. For most of human history, being rejected by a group was dangerous. Attention from others mattered because it determined survival. Your nervous system still carries that ancient logic. When you sense possible disapproval, it reacts as if something essential is at risk. Even though your life is not on the line, your body responds as if it were. A small social slip feels catastrophic. A neutral glance feels loaded. Silence feels like condemnation. This is how the illusion forms. You assume attention, you invent judgment, and your imagination fills in the blanks with ruthless efficiency. You feel as though a beam of awareness has locked onto you, exposing every flaw, every misstep, every imperfection. Yet the truth is far less dramatic. Everyone else is standing under their own imagined spotlight. They are replaying their own words, worrying about their own appearance, monitoring their own performance. They are not studying you, they are managing themselves. Epictetus taught that disturbance does not arise from events themselves, but from the meanings we attach to them. The discomfort you feel is not caused by what happened. It is caused by the story you tell yourself about what happened. And that story is almost always exaggerated, distorted, and unkind. You assume permanence where there is none. You assume significance where there is little. You assume judgment where there is distraction. This illusion would be harmless if it ended at discomfort. But it doesn't. Over time, it begins to shape your behavior. When you believe you are constantly being evaluated, you begin to edit yourself. You speak less freely. You hesitate before acting. You avoid situations where you might be seen. You choose safety over expression. Gradually, your world becomes smaller. Not because you lack ability, but because visibility feels dangerous. In Epictetus's view of human nature, this is a subtle form of self-enslavement. You are no longer guided by reason or values. You are guided by imagined reactions. You begin living as if an unseen audience is always present, monitoring, scoring, remembering. And the cruel irony is this: the more you try to avoid judgment, the more power it holds over you. At the core of this illusion is a confusion between what is real and what is assumed. Every moment of self-consciousness contains two layers. There is what actually happened, and there is the interpretation you placed on it. The event itself is usually small: a sentence, a look, a pause. The interpretation is enormous. It stretches into the future. It defines your identity. It predicts rejection. Epictetus would urge you to question the interpretation, not fight the feeling. To ask yourself what you actually know, rather than what your fear suggests. This is where overthinking disguises itself as responsibility. It feels like analysis. It feels like preparation. It feels like self-awareness. But most overthinking is not problem-solving. It is threat simulation. Your mind rehearses outcomes that almost never occur, convincing you that constant vigilance is protection. In reality, it is misdirected effort. You are spending energy on things that are not yours to control. Other people's thoughts, other people's reactions, other people's interpretations. The moment you recognize this, something loosens. Not because fear disappears, but because its authority weakens. You begin to see thoughts as mental events, not commands. You notice how quickly your mind jumps from a small moment to a sweeping conclusion. You realize how much of your anxiety is built on imagination rather than evidence. There is a quiet freedom in understanding that you are not the center of other people's attention. This realization does not diminish you. It releases you. When you stop assuming constant observation, you gain permission to speak imperfectly, to learn visibly, to exist without monitoring yourself. You stop performing for an audience that isn't there. You start acting in alignment with what matters to you. Epictetus did not promise comfort, he promised freedom. Freedom begins when you stop mistaking imagined judgment for reality. The spotlight dims the moment you stop feeding it, and once you see the illusion for what it is, you can never fully unsee it. Chapter 2, 6 Ways Imagined Judgment Shrinks Your Life. Once you recognize the spotlight illusion, its patterns start to appear everywhere. At a dinner table, in a meeting, while scrolling through social media, or simply in the quiet moments before you speak, your mind quickly flags imagined judgment. Awareness is the first crack in its power, but awareness alone does not dissolve the grip. The illusion survives because it presents itself as reason, responsibility, and self-protection. You believe you are being cautious, prudent, or socially intelligent, when in fact you are trapped in a loop of imagined evaluation. Epictetus observed that false judgments rarely announce themselves as lies. They appear sensible, they feel necessary, and because they are woven with emotion, they gain authority over your actions. This is why philosophy, in his view, is not abstract. It is practical. It trains you to confront the illusion where it lives, in daily moments, in automatic responses, and in patterns that repeat without notice. One of the first traps to notice is the social replay loop. You say something awkward. A pause forms. Your mind immediately fills in the silence with judgment. They think I'm weird. I ruin the mood. They'll remember this forever. You replay it endlessly, analyzing tone, facial expressions, and word choice. Epictetus would call this voluntary suffering. The event itself is over. Nothing is happening now. Yet the mind keeps the disturbance alive by adding story after story. Most people forget these minor moments almost instantly. Their attention returns to themselves, to their own worries and performances. The cost of the trap is not embarrassment, it is withdrawal. You avoid future interactions. You speak less. You shrink, and the world around you contracts. The second trap is appearance anxiety. You notice something off about how you look. A messy hairstyle, clothing that feels awkward, a body insecurity flaring up. Every glance becomes magnified. Every neutral reaction feels like scrutiny. The illusion convinces you that the world is watching, that their attention is focused on your flaws. Epictetus teaches that you control only what you value, not how others perceive you. In truth, people are absorbed in their own concerns. Most of the attention you imagine is projected inward by others themselves. Recognizing this asymmetry, how you are harsher on yourself than the world ever is, dissolves the trap. You begin to see that your self-judgment carries far more weight than any external evaluation. Then comes imposter syndrome. This trap activates not when you fail, but when you succeed. Praise, recognition, achievement. Suddenly, anxiety whispers that you are a fraud. They'll discover I don't belong. It was luck. I can't repeat this success. The spotlight illusion has turned inward. You are convinced that others are evaluating your legitimacy, even as they are occupied with their own concerns. Epictetus teaches that worth is not granted by approval, but earned through consistent action aligned with reason. The danger of this trap is the subtle erosion of growth. You downplay achievement, avoid responsibility, and limit opportunities. The remedy is ownership without ego. Acknowledge effort, recognize preparation, accept that participation and disciplined action define competence, not imagine judgment. Paranoia is the fourth trap, the shadow of absence. Silence, delayed responses, subtle shifts in dynamics, or unspoken tension. Your mind fills the void with narrative. They are talking about me. They have turned against me. I am excluded. This is the spotlight illusion operating through imagination and assumption. Epictetus warns against assigning intent without evidence. Every unexamined assumption is a seed of unnecessary conflict and isolation. The cost is internal separation. Instead of clarifying or communicating, you withdraw, fracture connections, and create imagined enemies. The Stoic countermove is courageous neutrality. Ask, what do I know? What might be another explanation? What action serves my values? Often the simplest step is honest engagement, not withdrawal or accusation. Workplace fear is the fifth trap. A delayed email, ambiguous tone, or constructive criticism can suddenly feel like a verdict on your career. The spotlight illusion magnifies normal professional dynamics into existential threats. Epictetus reminds that you cannot fully control reputation or perception, but you can control effort, integrity, and response. Avoidance leads to stagnation. Fear diminishes when action replaces assumption. Seeking feedback, correcting errors, and demonstrating learning restore agency and dissolve imagined judgment. The sixth trap is daily self-judgment, subtle and relentless. Hesitation to rest, to choose differently, or to act according to your instincts because you imagine the world's scrutiny. This is perhaps the most damaging. Epictetus teaches that living in accordance with reason, rather than imagined opinions, restores sovereignty. Each small compromise erodes self-trust. Every moment of imagined judgment that shapes your choices diminishes your agency. To counteract this, focus on decisions aligned with your values. When your choices reflect what matters to you, the imagined gaze becomes irrelevant. Notice the common thread across all six traps. They differ in appearance, but share a mechanism. You assume attention. You invent judgment. You surrender your agency. Epictetus consistently warned that confusion between what is yours and what is not is the root of suffering. Freedom returns when you reclaim that boundary. Recognition alone is not enough. You must redirect attention to what you can govern. Before we move further, take a moment to notice your own experience so far. Pause and reflect on a moment this week when you assumed judgment, hesitated, or withdrew. How did it feel in your body? What story did your mind tell you? If you are willing, share this in the comments. There is value in recognizing patterns together, in understanding that these illusions are universal, and that awareness is the first step toward reclaiming authority over your mind. This is not theory. This is training. Awareness, inquiry, and deliberate attention become your tools. By observing how the spotlight illusion shows up in small daily moments, you begin dismantling it before it hijacks action. By noticing, naming, and redirecting, you reclaim control. You prepare the mind to act rather than react, to move rather than freeze, to choose rather than obey imagined eyes. The process is subtle, but consistent practice transforms these moments from traps into opportunities for mastery. Chapter 3. From Overthinking to Inner Authority. By now, the patterns of imagined judgment are familiar. You can see them in social interactions, in work, in self-assessment. But recognition alone does not create lasting change. The next step is transformation, shifting from reaction to disciplined attention. Epictetus observed that freedom is not found in removing disturbances, but in removing false judgments about them. The spotlight illusion is powerful because it disguises itself as reality. You react to imagined eyes as if they are real. But once you separate fact from story, once you distinguish event from interpretation, the power it holds over you diminishes. Living free begins with understanding that overthinking is not evidence of caring too much, but evidence of misdirected attention. When you ruminate, you are not weak. You are misapplied. You are investing energy in what cannot be controlled, the thoughts, reactions, and interpretations of others. Epictetus taught that what lies outside your command should not govern your peace. Your mind has wandered into territory that does not belong to you. Recognizing this, you can redirect it to where it does belong, toward your own choices, actions, and reasoned response. This is a subtle but radical shift. Instead of responding automatically to imagined evaluation, you begin to act in accordance with what is real and actionable. You begin to live by principle rather than perception. The same nervous system that once flared at imagined scrutiny now becomes a tool for deliberate action. You do not suppress discomfort, you redirect it. You feel the anxiety, name the illusion, and let action follow. A practical way to do this is to establish a daily mental rehearsal. Each morning, anticipate that misjudgment, misunderstanding, or awkwardness will appear. Not with fear, but with preparedness. Consider, today I may be misunderstood, I may be overlooked, I may feel judged. None of this removes my ability to choose my response. This is not pessimism, it is anticipation. By rehearsing, you inoculate yourself against imagined evaluation. When judgment appears, real or imagined, you respond with calm rather than panic. You act in alignment with values, not imagination. This is mental sovereignty in practice. Overthinking thrives in stillness. It thrives in moments where your body and mind pause, allowing imagination to fill gaps. Action dissolves it. Not frantic movement, but deliberate, reason-aligned engagement. If your thoughts spiral, move. Complete a task. Speak. Contribute. Align motion with reason. This shifts focus from imagined spectators to tangible reality. And reality is far less hostile than the mind predicts. You begin to see the discrepancy between perception and truth. Anxiety loosens its grip as your mind recalibrates to what is truly in your control. The next layer is identity. Who are you when not performing for imagined eyes? Who are you when judgment loses its power? Epictetus observed that inner freedom is inseparable from the discipline of attention. The person whose attention is habitually guided outward by imagined evaluation will always be unsettled. The person whose attention is guided inward, toward reasoned choice, experiences quiet confidence. Confidence not born of recognition, not born of praise, not born of being impressive, but born of mastery over self. You are learning to live in this way, to inhabit your own presence fully without needing validation from the invisible audience. Consider the concept of being unremarkable. It is not defeatist, it is liberating. The spotlight illusion thrives on the belief that you must perform, impress, or justify existence. Stoicism rejects this. You are not here to be watched. You are here to act according to reason. When you accept the possibility of blending in, of being unnoticed, the burden of constant self-monitoring dissolves. Anxiety fades. Authenticity emerges naturally because you are no longer performing for a phantom audience. You act, speak, and live in alignment with principle rather than attention. Judgment will still appear. Sometimes it is real, sometimes it is imagined. Epictetus did not deny this. What he denied was its authority over you. If criticism is useful, extract the lesson. If it is baseless, discard it. If it is cruel, recognize it as reflection, not verdict. None of it can control your values unless you allow it. This creates a new operating system for your mind. You no longer react blindly. You respond with evaluation, reason, and self-sovereignty. The illusion begins to lose its grip because it no longer carries authority. To reinforce this transformation, adopt nightly reflection. Before sleep, ask, where did I give my power away today? Not to shame yourself, but to reclaim authority. Then ask, how will I respond differently next time? This habit interrupts unconscious patterns. It prevents the mind from slipping back into automatic obedience to imagined judgment. You go to sleep clearer, lighter, more grounded. Over time, the spotlight illusion ceases to appear automatically. Your mind has learned that it no longer works. You are training your attention to reside where it belongs, on what is within your control, actionable, and aligned with reason. This section is where action begins to replace fear. The mental habits you form here, anticipation, reflection, disciplined attention, and deliberate action lay the groundwork for autonomy. Each small choice to act instead of ruminate strengthens your mind's ability to resist illusion. Each moment you redirect focus from imagined eyes to reality builds quiet confidence. You do not need approval. You do not need attention. You only need reason, action, and presence. And as these habits deepen, overthinking fades naturally. It does not vanish through effort. It dissolves because the patterns that sustained it have been dismantled. By observing, naming, and redirecting, you are moving from reaction to mastery. The spotlight loses its command. You inhabit your own mental space fully. And from here, you are prepared to take the final steps toward living free, not just reacting less, but building a mind that no longer entertains the illusion at all. Each day, each small practice is a rehearsal in sovereignty. Each action taken in alignment with reason reinforces that freedom is possible. You are no longer the audience's prisoner. You are the observer and the actor of your own life. If you've noticed these patterns in yourself so far, pause and reflect. Which of these 6 traps appear most often in your daily life? Have you been avoiding, retreating, or shrinking under imagined attention? Consider sharing your experience. Even a brief reflection in the comments helps clarify your awareness. Seeing how these illusions manifest in others often strengthens your own insight and builds the foundation for change. Next, we will move deeper, transforming these insights into a disciplined mental practice that makes freedom automatic, replaces overthinking with calm decisiveness, and allows you to live without the constant pressure of imagined evaluation. This is where philosophy becomes lived, not studied. This is where the mind is trained, not entertained. Chapter 4. Training the mind to ignore imagined eyes. Now the transformation moves from awareness to habit. Recognition and reflection are important, but freedom becomes permanent only when your mind learns to respond differently by default. Epictetus observed that philosophy is not a set of ideas. It is a daily practice, a training of attention, a discipline of the mind. The goal is to live so that imagined judgment no longer commands your thoughts, reactions, or choices. This requires consistent, conscious effort, applied not in grand moments, but in small, repeated interactions with life. Begin by noticing when your attention drifts outward to what cannot be controlled. Perhaps a colleague's expression seems critical. Perhaps a friend's silence triggers a story of betrayal. Perhaps a social slip fills your mind with imagined horror. These are the moments where the spotlight illusion tries to regain power. Epictetus teaches that each of these moments is an invitation to interrogate the story, separate it from fact, and redirect attention toward what you can govern. The event itself is neutral. The story is where suffering lives. Ask, what evidence do I have? What else could be true? Does this demand action, or am I simply imagining? Each question weakens the illusion, returning authority to you. A second layer is intentional action. Overthinking thrives in stillness. It feeds on hesitation, replay, and rumination. You dissolve it through motion aligned with reason. Speak when action is required. Complete one task, contribute, move your body. Each deliberate step reinforces the understanding that the world is not a stage focused on you. Action shifts attention from imagination to reality. Anxiety diminishes because it is no longer the engine driving thought. You are exercising agency in the domain that matters, the present, actionable, controllable. The third layer involves identity. Consider, who are you when you are not performing for imagined eyes? The spotlight illusion has conditioned you to monitor yourself constantly, shaping behavior to avoid criticism or embarrassment. Epictetus guides you to inhabit a different identity, the person whose attention is governed by reason and values, not by imagined perception. This identity does not require admiration, validation, or acknowledgement. It requires presence. You act, speak, and live in alignment with principle. The discipline of attention becomes habitual. Freedom becomes habitual. Here a critical insight emerges, the courage to be unremarkable. The spotlight illusion thrives on the need to impress, to stand out, to justify existence. Stoicism rejects this premise. You do not need to perform. You do not need to entertain. You do not need to justify your presence. You are here to act according to reason, to fulfill obligations, and to cultivate inner integrity. Accepting the possibility of being unnoticed does not diminish life. It frees it. Anxiety fades, authenticity rises, and energy that once fed imagined evaluation is redirected toward meaningful engagement. Judgment, whether real or imagined, will still appear. Epictetus never denied this. The difference is that judgment no longer carries authority. Useful criticism is observed, analyzed, and integrated. Baseless critique is discarded. Cruelty is seen as a reflection of the speaker, not a verdict on your worth. Your values remain untouched. You are steady because your attention is disciplined, not because the world has changed. The mind that learns this becomes resilient, unshaken by illusion, and increasingly confident in its own sovereignty. To solidify this transformation, integrate nightly reflection. Before sleep, examine the day with curiosity and neutrality. Ask, where did I give my power away today? Not to shame, but to reclaim. Ask, how can I respond differently next time? This simple habit interrupts unconscious patterns. It ensures that the mind does not slip back into automatic obedience to imagined judgment. Over time, the spotlight illusion loses its frequency and intensity. Your attention remains home, focused on what matters, grounded in what is real. A fourth, vital component is emotional recalibration. Understand that discomfort is inevitable. Life will always present situations that trigger unease, embarrassment, or uncertainty. The Stoic approach does not aim to erase these feelings. It teaches that disturbance has no authority unless you grant it. You observe it, acknowledge it, and then act in accordance with reason. Fear, embarrassment, and self-consciousness become signals for attention, not commands. They indicate where the mind is vulnerable to illusion, offering an opportunity to exercise sovereignty. Finally, consider the cumulative effect of these practices. Awareness of the spotlight illusion, deliberate redirection of attention, disciplined action, identity grounded in reason, acceptance of being unremarkable, nightly reflection, and emotional recalibration. Each reinforces the others. Gradually, your mind no longer defaults to imagined judgment. Overthinking dissolves naturally. Calm decisiveness replaces anxiety. You are present, attentive, and free. Life expands because it is lived in alignment with values, not distorted by phantom scrutiny. At this point, pause and reflect. Notice where these patterns show up in your daily life. Which illusions dominate your attention? Where do you find yourself retreating, shrinking, or hesitating? If you are willing, share your reflections. Writing or commenting about your experiences deepens awareness and strengthens the foundation for the next stage of transformation. By examining your relationship to imagined judgment, you reinforce the discipline of attention, the cornerstone of inner freedom. Next, we will complete the final shift, integrating all these practices into a life where overthinking no longer dictates choices, where inner sovereignty is automatic, and where presence and reason consistently guide action. This is the culmination of training, where the spotlight illusion finally loses its authority permanently and your attention returns home. Chapter 5, The Quiet Confidence of Inner Freedom. Now comes the final shift, the integration of insight, awareness, and practice into a mind that no longer surrenders to imagined judgment. This is where philosophy ceases to be abstract and becomes lived. The person who trains attention consistently begins to inhabit a different space, one where overthinking no longer dictates action, where quiet confidence replaces anxiety, and where inner sovereignty is the default state. Epictetus observed that mastery of life is not about controlling external events, but about controlling the responses and judgments that arise within. Here, the spotlight illusion loses its power entirely, not because the world changes, but because your mind no longer grants imagined observers authority. The first key to this integration is habitual attention. Each moment, each interaction, presents an opportunity to notice when your mind drifts into imagined evaluation. Instead of obeying the instinct to shrink or rehearse fearful outcomes, you pause. You examine the story. You separate fact from fiction. You ask, what evidence do I have? What is within my control? What action aligns with my values? This disciplined attention, applied consistently, rewires the mind. The more you practice, the less automatic the illusion becomes. Your inner dialogue becomes a tool for guidance rather than imprisonment. The second key is deliberate action. Overthinking thrives in stasis, in imagining consequences, in running mental simulations that rarely happen. Epictetus emphasized that action aligned with reason restores dignity and authority. Speak when there is something to say. Move when motion is needed. Complete the task that reality requires. Each action returns attention to what is real, to what matters, to what can be controlled. Anxiety and imagined scrutiny dissolve because they are no longer the drivers of behavior. By repeatedly choosing action over rumination, you create a mind that defaults to engagement rather than fear. The third key is identity recalibration. The person who inhabits the spotlight illusion behaves as if the world's judgment defines worth. Epictetus teaches that inner freedom arises when you define worth by reason and consistent action, not by imagined applause or criticism. You adopt an identity anchored in principle rather than perception. You begin to act without the need for recognition, to rest without guilt, to speak without fear of imagined evaluation. Each choice made from this position strengthens the mind's sovereignty and gradually renders the spotlight irrelevant. A fourth, subtle but profound realization is the courage to be unremarkable. The illusion persists because you are trained to believe that performance is necessary, that visibility is essential, that being noticed validates existence. Stoicism rejects this premise entirely. You do not need to impress. You do not need to entertain. You do not need to justify your presence. You only need to live in accordance with reason. Accepting the possibility of blending into life, of being forgotten, releases anxiety at its source. The mind no longer monitors itself compulsively, and authenticity emerges naturally. You are free to act according to what matters, not according to imagined eyes. Judgment, real or imagined, will continue to appear. Epictetus never claimed the world would stop being unpredictable or critical. What he denied was its authority. Useful criticism can be integrated. Baseless or cruel judgment can be discarded. None of it touches the values you have chosen to guide your life. Each interaction becomes a test of attention and reason, not a threat to identity. Over time, these moments cease to destabilize because the mind has learned that freedom resides not in circumstance, but in disciplined response. To reinforce this, cultivate nightly reflection. Ask, where did I give my power away today? Where did I act according to fear rather than reason? This is not shame. It is recalibration. It is the strengthening of boundaries between what belongs to you and what does not. When repeated consistently, this simple act trains the mind to resist unconscious surrender. Patterns of imagined evaluation lose their habitual hold. The spotlight illusion becomes transparent. The mind rests in presence, clarity, and reason. The culmination of all these practices is quiet confidence. Not arrogance, not indifference, not numbness. Confidence grounded in self-sovereignty, in clarity of action, in understanding where attention belongs. You speak when necessary, rest when needed, and act when required. You no longer narrate life through imagined eyes. The mind is anchored in principle, not in performance. You have trained attention, disciplined action, recalibrated identity, and cultivated the courage to exist without validation. The illusion no longer governs your behavior. The ultimate freedom, Epictetus teaches, is that you no longer need permission to be yourself. You no longer shrink to avoid judgment. You no longer wait for approval. You are present, deliberate, and fully engaged. The spotlight has dimmed. The illusion has fractured. Attention has returned home. Your inner life is governed by reason, values, and self-sovereignty. You are no longer performing for an audience that never existed. You are living authentically, deliberately, and freely. If you have stayed with this journey to the end, take a moment to reflect. Recognize how far you have come in observing, naming, and redirecting these patterns. Consider sharing your insights, experiences, or moments of realization in the comments. This is not about boasting, but about clarifying your awareness and contributing to a collective understanding of freedom from illusion. And if you found this guidance valuable, subscribing allows you to continue practicing these principles daily, deepening mastery over attention, strengthening clarity, and living with calm resilience in a world that constantly seeks to pull you outward. Your mind is no longer captive. You are no longer shrinking. You are not living for imagined eyes. You are present. You are deliberate. You are free.